Hey, thank you everybody for coming out and sticking around. It's nice to be with you. It's almost 10 years, right, since I met you and Cody at South by Southwest?
2014.
2014, yeah. I'm Thomas Chatterton Williams. I'm a writer at The Atlantic. At the time, I was profiling Cody for Louis magazine, a French magazine, and you were already there.
Mm-hmm.
You were already making your magnum opus. You know? No, but truly, you've dedicated so much time and effort to documenting Cody's project. I guess I want to start by asking you how that came up. You're a nice girl from Texas.
It's still nice.
How did this interest happen? How did this project come about?
Purely by accident. Well, this is my second feature film. I didn't know I was going to make documentaries. I never thought about making documentaries. The first film that I made, it just kind of happened. Within 5 days, I started making a film, and Cody was in it as kind of like the yin yang of no control for guns and pro control for guns, if you will. And when that finished wrapped in 2014, out in 2015, I wasn't done. I don't know. I just felt like Cody's story was going to go on for a long time, and there was going to be a lot of ups and downs. And in 2015, I asked him, like, can I just continue? And I didn't really know what that meant, thankfully, because I didn't realize how long that would take. The last time we filmed was January of 2022. So it was a long story. So it just happened, but I guess it turned into a bit of an obsession.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's one of the things it's a defining element of the past decade of your life, for sure, your relationship with Cody. And Cody, you at the end, I really find your comments fascinating, and it reminds me of conversations we had before, and you mentioned Camus and Revolt and Rebellion. And there's a line in The Rebel where Camus says that rebellion cannot exist without a strange form of love. And I think of you as having something like a very strange form of love for what you do and what you've kind of dedicated your life to. Can you speak a bit about where your revolt and rebellion, this much and no more, comes from?
Thank you. That's funny. I was reading The Rebel on the way in here.
Oh, really?
And it's in his introduction. But like Nietzsche says too in his Uses and Abuses of History, there's a perverse kind of love where your conscience shrinks down to a point, and when you really assert like your project, it's almost as if nothing else has the right to exist. Like only this thing that you're doing has the right to live, and you have no respect for existence itself outside of that. So it is a love, but it's a kind of evil too. I think that's what it's like. And when I look back at that guy, for him, like nothing else was happening in the world. And if it's love, if it's fanaticism, call it what you want, but there was nothing else.
You put it in the past tense now.
When I look back at that past, there's a few Cody Wilsons in there that I still recognize. It's difficult to watch this thing. I don't know how any of you guys. Thanks, but like when I've seen it a couple times, I'm like, damn, I'm immediately co-piloting that guy's brain, like John Malkovich or something. I'm like, you feel the body feelings and the terror and everything. It's there's not a lot of good news for that guy for a while, and yet, right? It's this assertion. It's this, like Camus says, this asceticism. Like if it's anything, it's this insistence that there's something here that I am right about, and like to the end, I will assert it.
Yeah, and I think that's what Jessica picked up on too, is that she, in the conversations I've had with you over the years about it, you believe there's something there that's correct and that must be defended even at great cost and at the cost of years of filmmaking and believing in the work. Can you speak on what the process was like making this? You've had so many years of conversations. How did you edit that down?
It took a long time. So at the very beginning in 2015, I must say that I had to do a lot of reading because as Cody talks, as you might be aware, he talks in terms of philosophy. So read a lot to kind of catch up. And at the beginning of the film, the reason I really wanted to do this film was everything that you ran into on the media or journalistically when it came to the topics of guns, of Cody, of 3D printing, of everything. It was always hit pieces. Even the pieces that, were like, oh, like cozying up to Cody, and you can tell like they were being like, it was still a hit piece. And I thought it did, just like any kind of journalism that's picking a side before they know who they're speaking with, does a great disservice. So from the get-go, and from knowing Cody since 2013 at that point, it was important to demonstrate via Cody's experience how much ethics and morals were actually behind the projects. And therein lies kind of like the great curiosity of kind of messing with ideas, especially if people have their minds made up already. So this film started with just really wanting to show or find out or discover the actual motivations and why it is actually important to understand it, because this is a film about guns, but is it really just about guns? It's not. It's about creation and code and what government can control and how they can surveil it, and also the internet and the digital age. So I keep on using this term technopolitics, but technology outrunning politics, and then what happens.
Cody, you always mention, and you did again in the film in conversations we'd had in the past, you mentioned radical difference or alterity and a kind of commitment to maintaining a space for radical difference. Can you expand on that a bit?
God damn. Like that dream you have, like this is the question you always want, Yeah, well, can't believe this is happening. We live in the hell of the same, right? Like to use like the theory torture from the French tradition, like this is the hell of the same. And we dream of something outside of it, and we don't know what that is, something radically other, and we're even given the psychodrama of the other in our media, like, oh, this is, day of jihad, October 14th or 13th, but we know this is not it. And I'm not saying I do know what is it yet. It's like you're allowed to talk about alterity or maybe teach about it in a seminar, but you're not allowed to try to pursue it, embody it, like play games with things like even your own death and in public view. And like I know I have an intuition about some of this, but it's just an intuition, and it's like the entire world apparatus is like built to prevent you or dissuade you from enjoying or playing life on this difficulty setting. So you have access to my insight as well. I guess that's the most I can say about it just off the cuff.
Yeah, that's a good answer, and it's provocative. It's actually genuinely provocative, because what's fascinating to me is somebody really outside of the gun culture and outside of the libertarian culture that flourishes around the University of Texas at Austin. It's kind of provocative, the project you're doing, in a way that most people, even who think they're doing provocative things, aren't coming close to. They're not actually challenging a kind of sameness. And it's interesting to think about how we just live our lives without ever attempting anything that would shake up the status quo.
I'll jump back in. Okay, so I'll do office hours like with Curtis Yarvin, like when he comes to town or something, right? And he'll say to me, so we play these, I have a struggle sessions with myself about this too. He says, well, the system isn't really, upset by what you're doing with the 3D guns, right? And I have to say, well, yeah, I know you're right, Uncle Yarv, I know. And so like you play this game even with yourself, so I can't sit here with satisfaction and say, I know I found
what would be the basis for the system not being?
Well, Yarvin, he's particular and peculiar with his own vocabulary. He says, well, you can mess as much as you want with DOD, actually, and there's no consequences. But if you mess with State Department, you'll lose your life. And you see a little bit of the difference there. If I was just a DOD guy being like, hey, check it out, guys, technical manuals, no one would care. There's something else happening. And so if we're just spending time in like the cosplay of the military industrial, I don't know. I get the sense that like this system doesn't care about that. And so I'm guilty of that sometimes, because it is a beautiful, or I don't know, it's fun to use the decoration of the military. And I've seen like people in our community fetishize that by itself. So I know that there's a trap there, and Uncle Yarvin has helpfully pointed it to me a few times.
Were you going to jump in? I saw you raise your mic.
I think it was more, I thought you were going to go into more of like the theater of it.
We can go wherever you want, guys.
I wonder, before I keep asking questions, I wonder if the audience has any questions, if anybody wants to probe Cody's mind or congratulate Jessica. Yeah.
I just, when will it be out, and where can we encourage people to see it?
You can get it pre-sale from the website, deathathletic.com. It's coming out on October 21st. And so Google, Amazon, iTunes, but still best to get it from the website, because then it really, I don't have to give 50% to streaming. So deathathletic.com. Yeah.
In the film, Cody, you mentioned that politics is sort of like very much related to owning guns, and sort of like you're talking sort of like as a political actor in some way, and that if you're just sort of like an NPC, is like this is not of interest to you. It's like to be armed is sort of like something throughout history since always. Well, you also mentioned before in a different talk, you said talked about post-politics technology. I don't know if you do you see yourself as a political actor, or are you post-politics in some way?
Okay, I think I want to be a post-political figure, post-democratic or post-liberal, and yet I'm nostalgic for classical politics because that's gone, And so, okay, it's fun to read Machiavelli, talk about a kind of military populism, a people under arms. Wow, imagine that, a people. Imagine that, arms, fun, and so, okay, then you can see how this is retranslated, like in the Anglo political conversation, Harrington and like the weird misreadings that are particular to the ancient English Constitution, and how this is like absolutely fetishized by the Second Amendment. It's just fun to like play these games and live in these idioms or with them, and yet, yeah, you recognize that once you have a definite sense of it, it is past, it's gone, it's not something you can return to, and I'm not suggesting that it can be returned to. So in some sense, you're always wearing the masks of like ancient ideologies and hoping that you find something there, a model that you can meet and then maybe exceed. Yeah.
I would push you, Cody, and say that everything you do is so political because you love politics so much. And the craziest thing is like I think a lot of the motivation behind this, maybe haphazardly, is democratic.
Sure, and okay, to this point, it's like, well, okay, the best part about the English history with the militia is that it is boring, actually, to be a civic Republican idea of the people under arms is like super boring and tedious. Like, no one's going to be a farmer, no one wants to be a soldier. Their idea of civic beings is like super boring to us, like, metropolitan moderns are rootless cosmopolitans. Okay. So we don't want to do that. And in fact, that's actually the history of this thing. And so now universal armament is actually possible, and it's just another channel on TV or another website you can go to. Like, I'm aware of this. And yet, there's a little tension, right? If you know about 3D printing at all, what do you know you can do with that printer? And so there's this little pang of conscience, this little thing where you can think evil, even on accident, because, if you're doing anything with a 3D printer, you're printing a gun. Should I restate the question for the benefit of the audience? Okay. Ooh, what a question. All right, so it seems like, okay, there's a program of bare life on, right, where the point of politics or whatever this system is to reduce us all to our bare animal condition or something like that, to at least reduce us in our capacities to something like an animal condition. Okay, COVID is a good example of what has happened here, or at least as a pretext for doing it, for reasons automatic or by design or not. What can we do to stop that? Everyone's looking at me like I know the answer to this question. Okay, so, bare life is this thing that Agamben says you can at least assert. And so leftists, I don't want to, alienate half the audience, but in leftist theory, this is often like restructured to be like, well, good, like BLM, the street protests, we assert our bare life in these things. There's a kind of tradition, at least in French logic, of like promoting what's called divine violence, like, okay, there's a way of, at least in this idea, of turning this idea of bare life back on the system, which has, like, I don't know, promoted it, grown it. I'm not about promoting your bare life. I like this idea that you can steal the vocabulary from these people, and then all it takes is just one guy to be like, nah, sue me, put me in jail. You know, there's something of that in this, but I don't like the traditional, I don't know, narrative of 20th century protest where it's like, it's up to us to come out into the streets and promote our bare life and, you know, turn the other cheek. I know that's wrong. And I think like Mr. Williams, Chatterton Williams, has said to me, there's, if we settle the question of suicide like in Camus, then we have to also settle the question of murder. To decide to act is at some point also a decision on if you will kill. And so it's not about bare life to me. It's about what to do with violence.
But your question also was like, you'll eat bugs and own nothing, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a part of it.
But like systems that you can build now that haven't been built that force against that, right?
Yeah.
What new systems are there? Still in crypto.
Guys, like the stuff that interests me right now is, you know, have hard money, Bitcoin. I watch these computer hackers show me the coolest, you know, the only way to live on your computer at all is to like reverse your thinking about what computing is now. Okay, the safest place in your computer now is like a virus that takes over Microsoft Word, where like Microsoft can't observe you anymore. Okay, all right, that's the only space for freedom. All right, so we think of parallel spaces, parallel societies, like the parallel polis we visited in Prague. I mean, gosh, the transhuman moment, right? Like the threat of the political and the bare life is worse than you think. It's invading everything, not just society, but your body. Big data will be in your mind, you know. Elon Musk will give you an option to play a commercial before you can complete that thought, you know. So, I mean, the problem of the political is, God, something you may not be allowed to think about unless you have a premium subscription soon, you know. So think about that.
Sure, in the glasses.
Hi, first of all, amazing film, guys, and Jessica, super incredible. I was like,
Thank
completely
you.
riveted the entire time. I was curious, you mentioned about doing some reading. I was wondering if you would share any sort of highlights from your reading list, or Cody, if you have any recommendations. I heard obviously kind of a lot of references to sort of French existentialism, but any other sort of theory that's sort of informed some of your thoughts?
Lots and lots of Baudrillard. Yeah, that was like a lot of the main beginning, because there's so much on the floor that didn't make it, but a lot at the beginning was discussion of evil. You only get that one glimpse of it. This is 2015. I don't even know if you remember this stuff, but kind of trying to force like the humanity, or seeing if there is any, not force, but like trying to find out if there's humanity in Cody's projects, was like a lot of discussion of like, where do you land on the idea of evil, and is this evil or is this not evil, or is evil good? Is this idea of terrorism in this sense of terrorizing the politic, is that what you have to do? I think Baudrillard had a lot of that.
The late Baudrillard's like Agony of Power, for example, like his he describes the white terror of world order, for example. The white terror is interested in this perfect crime where used the example of AI, right? This is before he has that example, but now we have it. It's not enough that history happened and is unclean. We have to reach back now with this recriminative view and clean it all up, you know, and we have to whitewash it. And that's not just meant in this racialized overtone, although that's included in it too. But look, the title of this film is taken from Peter Sloterdijk's book, You Must Change Your Life. I had begun to experiment with this idea that like, well, I'm not ever going to win. And what does winning even mean? But if this long defeat means anything, then I have to integrate it. I have to make it my blood. And I was just lucky enough to read Sloterdijk's You Must Change Your Life. And he says there's a form of training or practice called like the death performance, you know, the art of the beautiful death, like from the Greeks, or like from the death of Socrates, where you can reverse your circumstances, even though they are compulsory. You can treat them as voluntary. Okay, the death of Socrates, he superordinates this death sentence, directs the passion play himself. A better example is the death of Christ. And look, this, I know how ridiculous this all sounds, but okay, he's on the cross and he says, right, mission accomplished, basically, right? Like, my Father, I give my spirit to you. He's basically like superordinating everything and athleticizing it. Okay, so from Peter Sloterdijk's You Must Change Your Life, we draw the title of this film, which was a conversation we'd had in the past few years. That's one answer.
And to go on with the title part, I I think this kind of, to me, this was like a modernization of what Peter Sloterdijk talks about, because it's definitely more in the, the framework of religion. But today, if you're a type of person that has a sort of ethic that's different, or ideas or anything, you have to kind of become a death athlete, because those ideas or those opinions, you might get, you get canceled on the social front, the cultural front, and you have these mini deaths, and the people that, keep on surviving it are, death athletes. It's kind of like a really awesome slogan.
The skirmishes when timely men take on a posthumous attitude, just this whole thing, like, okay, well, so what, live, die, repeat. She let me say that in the beginning. Thanks for that.
You right there. Yeah. No, you.
Okay. One thing I loved about the movie is that we felt like we were living through it at the same time as you were, looking in the past. So Jessica, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about, like, when you chose to film versus not, how you made some of those decisions, or did you film a lot more we never didn't even see?
There's a lot of footage on the floor, like a lot. So through the years, we were just kept on being in touch, and I was following everything in the news, what was happening. And then sometimes I would just randomly check in, be like, what's happening? He's like, oh, I'm going to court tomorrow. And I'll be like, I'm coming to Austin. So like things like that happened quite often. Or things were planned. So it was just a constant communication throughout the years. And trying to line up when things were happening. But there was quite a bit on the floor as well. So, yeah.
I'm going to start this with a personal statement and commendation, then I'll actually ask the question. So I was at the premiere of the original documentary probably almost a decade ago at this point, and I was definitely on one side of the gun control issue, and I'll say this documentary really made me question my original position and created a lot of thought experiments for myself. So in that, you were incredibly successful.
Cool.
The goal here. And I myself was thinking of Camus, Fanon, of other sort of philosophers as I was watching this. So you're talking about many deaths, and you're talking about, how things have changed, Cody, over the last 10 years. So for Jessica, I'll say, how has this whole process of making this film changed your own philosophy? And Cody, can you dig a little bit deeper into how you align with the mission at this point now, decades down the road, and if that's changed at all for you, and what you mean when you say, I feel like I'm looking at my past selves?
Okay, so where to start? I guess the spirit of the type of person that would be interested in such things have always lived inside me, if that makes sense. I may not have thought of or associated with certain things in the past, but there are certain things in my life that I've always been very confrontational about. We can put it there, I guess, or rebellious, right? So, I mean, starting in 2013, like, learning about Bitcoin, that was awesome to me. Like, I missed that whole all the news for that until 2013, and that was like a turning point in my mind about things to come, right? So, and then the political, like, I was not apolitical, but still not interested in voting. Always thought it was a bit of a puppeteer government, still do. But I didn't have that stronger essence of reason, I guess, behind it. It was just what I believed. This all kind of like solidified in the last 10 years for me. I tried really hard in both my films to really stay away from them with like bias, if you will, and really tell the story through Cody, and my other one through all the other characters that were in that film. And even where I may have landed, probably in much closer proximity in beliefs, I still was hoping that this could, it's told through Cody's story completely. So, I mean, a lot has changed. I think a lot have changed with all of us and everything that's happened in the last 10 years. And you either kind of like accept the fate of what people are telling you in media and everywhere else, or you don't at this point.
That's good. I remember the question. Okay, so, I guess there's a tension. Like, we want to live historically. It's difficult to shrug off what accumulates, what piles up. And after a while, if we're too stuck in a story of who we are and what we've done, we find that we're totally immobile, can't do anything. So for me, it's like learning to forget to some degree, and also knowing that to act, your conscience has to shrink down to a point. To act is to not think historically at all. And I try to bind these two things. And I thought of the Death Athletic as, over the last couple of years, as a plastic power. And it's just one of many. It's like maybe the more extravagant or flamboyant of these, wow, what a challenge to like involve our own death in some kind of metaphysical stage performance or something. Really extreme. But when I began, I just thought I was doing something with critical theory that critical theorists were like, too weak to do. I'm just attacking the symbolic fictions of the United States. Ha, 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 very funny. I'm happy to break the internet. Okay, but then, you break your life too, and I'm like, well, I have to build out of this. And so now I need models, and now I need history, and now I need to think historically for another reason, not just to tear down things. And like my friend Curtis has said, when you break things, it almost doesn't matter how you break them. But when you build things, those initial conditions really matter. So I had to recruit people. I had to become more of like a fatherly figure. I had to employ people. I had to move into my late 20s, my 30s. So yeah, I began to think more in terms of like how to build things, which is really, really different, and requires models and conversations with people, senders and receivers from across time, and please help me. I know those things are there. I think I take myself less seriously, if that's at all believable. But and then at the end, it's like, you feel like when the legal things happen to you, this is a personal injustice to me, and the sweet bitterness of like, self-righteous, like, oh my God, they did it to me. And now I just see that the law is a plaything. It's like the things you print and want to play with. And if you can maintain that frame, you're much more deadly, I think.
All the way back.
Thanks for a great film. So curious, do you see it more as a First Amendment film or as a Second Amendment film? It's obviously both, but I'm interested in the relationship between the two, where you see the importance or the interplay between them.
I actually see it more as a First Amendment film. One of the most amazing things is people still think that Cody hands people guns and has sold guns, and it's kind of, that's not the issue. And going into like the crypto wars and code, and how if certain laws are passed still, because there's a lot of still lawsuits on the table that may never finalize, right? The implications for the Second Amendment for printed guns, it's ineffectual. It's it's plastic of itself. But the implications for First Amendment are much higher, and much more repetitive in society with everyone else, like Assange, like Manning, like Aaron Schwartz. This is all First Amendment stuff.
Was that question?
That was it.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Two questions. I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts broadly on the social contract? And by that, I just mean like a system by which citizens sacrifice some of their rights to a nation state in order to live in an organized society, and they go through some democratic process to define that organization for the society. And then also, listening to you talk about political philosophy, it had me wondering, were you influenced at all by industrial society and its future?
I can't claim a direct, to answer the second part first, I can't claim a direct influence. I have read it, in time, and I'm fond of the memes, and everything. But, and by the way, I think he's right. At least that thesis, that central thesis, which is like related to 90s commanding heights libertarianism. Well, society, at least the society that Uncle Ted understood, can't actually plan the way that it says it can plan. It can't organize that way. It can only fail, right? It's only this train in perpetual derailment, and will only lead to industrial planetary disaster. I like that narrative. I think that's true. demonstrably true. Okay, cool. I don't take a ton of influence from Uncle Ted, though. And the first question, social contract. Social contract, that's a fun story. That's nice. I like to read stories when I go to bed, too. Helps me fall asleep. But I don't mean to disrespect your question. In fact, Rousseau really liked armed popular militarism, you could call it, or whatever. There's parts of the civic republican idea of the Anglo tradition of the people under arms that Rousseau really respected. He was all about, so now I have to pick these characters through history and say, were they pro-gun or not? So I'm just playing 2A politics in the past, but I'm not a social contract theorist. I'm a social systems theorist, and I think maybe there might be a mass media social contract of sorts.
Do we have time for more questions, or
I don't know. What time is it?
It's 5 to 10.
Oh yeah, we have 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
If we have more questions.
Yeah, I have a question about the idea of like pursuing death, or I think really pursuing your edges, like how I see it, kind of the thing that unravels you is also the thing that kind of brings life. And I think about the idea of a person pursuing their edge or that mission that they have as something that brings in other humans to support them. I'm curious if you think it's important to have adoption for your idea, or if it's really just about the mission itself.
Oh, I was asking you. I have commentary though.
What you've just said is the best distillation of the idea, if that's what it is, right? I don't know. All I know is at some point this became more than like a self-conscious display. This was like exactly like an extreme sport, like an extreme individual exercise. And I'm only interested in taking it as far as it can go. I don't think I want to slow down. And right, like, okay, now it's like virilio or something. It's like, well, just what's the limit? I don't know that you can really ask people to step out of their lives and do things like that. It seems kind of ridiculous. So all I can say is I think these plastic powers are using the athleticization of even like your worst circumstances. I think that is helpful. And surely there's something to that in integrating and making what is past and foreign and those things that are dangerous and poisonous to you, turning those into your blood. That has to be a vital exercise.
I'd be curious about what's next for both of you, both the movie and then distributed and everything else. Like, what's going to come down the pipeline in the next year and a half or so?
Hopefully money. So I can do another movie that I want to do. That's what I want. I need anybody want to fund a film or two, let me know. I've got ideas. I just, this is such a hard film to get into the mainstream right now. Well, for a long time, but especially right now. So just working to get more eyes on this film and get it out there and spread the word. And we've got some good press, and hopefully we can just get more. So for this film, just to keep on, growing, even if it's incremental. And then for the future I do hope to find a producer, executive producer that just like Samurai, that just like gave money and then walked away, because that was great. They never asked for anything. And when I gave them the film, they're like, oh, dang, this is an awesome film. And I was like, thanks for believing in me. So I want that again. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, well, so I just achieved like this monopoly in the United States of selling kid guns. It took me like 5 years to get this monopoly. And then Joe Biden keeps taking it away from me. And on Friday, the Supreme Court stayed my injunction from the Fifth Circuit. So on Monday, I'm trying to, I'm hoping that the Supreme Court gives it back to me. That would be cool. Of course, winning is one of the quickest ways to lose when you play my game. But yeah, I mean, there's constant lawsuits, there's constant fights. We could be here all night.
Can you just expand that? Why is winning the quickest way to lose in this case?
I have found that losing is one of the best ways to win, because they commit themselves. This system, when it finally commits itself to black letter, you're like, thank you, and then there's like 4 other ways you can do what you're trying to do anyway, right? But then when you win, Jesus, there's a million ways they can stop that and take you down.
I mean, this is exampled perfect, and when the AG in Seattle writes down, you can email and send and give it by hand. Like nobody had put that in black letter ever. So when they thought like they had actually boxed Cody in, they actually just wrote down all the terms that made it possible. So it was kind of like an ironic moment.
That's the way my file sharing site works right now. It's one of the things we do. We have a file sharing site called DefCAD. It comes in the movie, and the State Department wrote, or I'm sorry, the Commerce Department wrote how we do that site into the federal regs. So there's a complaint that I operate like an unfair monopoly, and this is technically true. So in a way, like, right, if you survive long enough, if you lose long enough, you're kind of baked into the terrible cake that they're making. But don't win. You don't want to win.
You're asking why?
That's the question. Why is it so upsetting to the boomer mind?
Well, I think it's just any new tech is very upsetting to people. Why is it so upsetting to the boomer mind about 3D printed guns? I think it's one that just any new tech that first always kind of rocks the boat, but then this pervasive idea of, I guess, like, all of a sudden people will just become like more criminal and become more terrible just because of like a new way of doing a thing. So it's actually like the thing makes, I think it's like a convoluted idea that like a new idea will actually make people evil rather than people just choosing that on their own.
Speaking as an elder millennial, I flew out to Texas to meet Cody because I found it particularly more disturbing that someone could just print a plastic, untraceable, unserialized gun and take it on an airplane.
You were disturbed back then.
I was definitely disturbed. I was. It's disturbing. I mean, I find it really provocative, and the idea that somebody could have, something that doesn't set off metal detectors. Maybe Gen Z is different, but I feel like it's not even a boomer thing.
But that was something that also like the media was like baking into your mind that would happen.
Totally.
It was this constant onslaught. Like they were giving you the idea to do the thing, which never happened actually. So it ended up being.
It's true. Has there been? I haven't seen a
journalist
story of somebody printing a gun and committing a crime with one.
Now
we're close.
Yeah.
We're close.
But at the beginning, it was only like journalists printing them and trying to sneak them into political places.
What's
which
happening?
Was fun. Yeah.
What's happening now? There's what's called a giggle switch you can put on a Glock. This is like one of the most popular things you can print right now. It's just a little piece of plastic. It turns your Glock into an automatic pistol. This is very popular in cities like Houston, Oakland, Baltimore. Think about it. So this is happening. It's not dissected in as legible a way as it could be for you. So, and at some point, sure, they'll do like a mass shooting with a plastic gun, and we'll have to talk about it. But if I could rope back to the boomer question, do you mind?
Yeah.
I've had time to think about it, right? Because at first I'm like, well, I know who will support a gun project, those boomers, and the NRA boomer is like, no, I don't think this is a good idea. And so I've had lots of years of them explaining why. And it's forgotten now in the gun space, but like for the first, 5 years, and while you're filming with me, everyone thought like this wouldn't happen. Even within the gun space, they thought it was a bad idea. So I've gotten a lot of species of this response. But when I boil it down at the end of the day, like Machiavelli has been mentioned tonight, he says, classical politics, like good arms make good laws. Well, then what do plastic arms make? And I think to the boomer mind, it's this idea that like all traditional social institutions and coordinates of the political are dissolving, they're melting, they themselves have become plastic. It's a plea for order, the poor little boomer. But at the same time, I'm sympathetic. It's just, damn, man, Sean Hannity's not going to give you the goods on this stuff. So it seems to be this late, kind of Blackstone gloss on like why we thought about military civic populism. I don't know. I think if you look at the Ukrainian conflict, FPV suicide drones, the fact that armor and artillery almost don't matter. And or the example of Afghanistan, you can fight with small arms and then you get hardcore equipment at the end as a bonus. I think there's always going to be a place for small arms, printed or not. And the printed dimension, by the way, it really boasts of itself right now. That community is very proud of what they've done, but it's kind of overprinted, to be fair, over-engineered. There's mostly like, okay, you see like a printed MP5. Okay, they've printed like a casing around an MP5. There's a little bit of, there's still a lot of showmanship there, and much has been overstated about the future of, let's say plastic arms. So I don't mean to overstate it as well, but I know there's something to disintermediating this military-industrial thing and stopping it from eating everything else in the name of dual use. So maybe AI is the next chapter of self-defense.
One of the things that really moves history is military technology, and is mentions that that if you were sort of like into tactic, like want to build something sci-fi, really changes the world, is like you need stuff like the Dune from the shield from Dune that basically was like renders all explosions in like firearms completely obsolete, and then like that's how you actually get sort of like strongman back in history, because you can only die by the slow sword. I don't know if you have some sci-fi ideas that you've thought about at all. On what?
I mean, I like the Minovsky particle from Mobile Suit Gundam. It renders all electronic surveillance. Everything's back to hand-to-hand combat like in Dune, but there's no such thing. Or yet you see these radio teams like with Russia and Ukraine. Okay, what's the war? Like every square kilometer of the gray zone has tons and tons of drones. We have to prevent these drones from seeing us. Or like the conflict with the YPG against Turkey. Turkey's become a major drone power. This is not talked about nearly enough. Those drones are cheap. Those drones are enabled with AI. They come in swarms. Loitering munitions, for example. The bomb just waits for you to show up.
It's terrifying.
Ways
If you
to
haven't
stop
seen that stuff, it's really terrifying. Yeah. There's lots of videos.
Palantir Gotham. I don't mean to upset Teal people who may be here. If you can just murder Palantir, that's good.
Sorry, I've been struggling to figure out how to articulate my question, but you describe your activities as some sort of like extreme sport that you're pursuing, and I'm like, and then I was starting to think about what are examples of extreme sports, and oftentimes they don't really have implications upon the world, right? Like it's an internal activity. You jump out of an airplane because it's good for you, right? And so I'm just curious about how you conceptualize it as an extreme sport when at the same time it seems to have immense impact upon the earth and upon me and upon others. And so I'm trying to think about what most fundamentally is at the bottom of this. And is it like your struggle with like existence? Is this like a Cody Wilson trying to be happy in the world? And my question is like, why is everyone else roped into that? Not so, or is it? Are you doing it for a principle? Like, is it the end, or is this an instrumental?
Yeah, principles in politics, right, are kind of refuges of scoundrels. Maybe. I mean, like I believed that I had political ideas, and I enjoy ideology. I think ideology is important, and yet, right, there's this idea that play is somehow these great games are more noble than work. Academic work, advocacy, and these other things. This game is like war to me, and there is like a great, hatred or allergy to the United States, or maybe like I do regret believing in the revolutionary and mythical foundations of this country and really taking that seriously. And it's almost to me like I'm killing that myth with so much love for it because I know this system never believed in it. And if I can make it real, that's the worst thing for this system, this great military-industrial power. So I'm sorry that it's now devolved into this kind of poetic thing where it's this guy wondering like how long he's going to do it or how far he can take it. But Justice Alito may give it all back to me on Monday, and I will not stop running with the ball.
Can I ask you what your parents think of it now? Of your project?
I don't tell them much.
No, but they make this appearance in the movie, and I thought about that.
I didn't even tell them I'm in New York right now. Yeah, like my parents think, well, fine. I've told them in the past, they're like, well, why? I'm like, well, look, I'm just looking for the shore. Okay, I'm trying to do this thing. This is why I'm looking for the shore. I promise there will be fair harbors. We'll figure it out. Everything will make sense. But right now, I need to find the shore. And I always kind of, in my wooden ship, I'm changing what that destination is. But I think my parents think I'm not insane yet, and they understand. And I think they share something. Like every now and then, my mom or my dad will be like, you know what, I get it a little more now. Okay, I thought there was something really wrong with what was happening.
When you didn't go to the corporate law firm and just
everybody's lived through COVID. Everybody's lived through, it's not like you can't necessarily characterize it. It's not like there's any one intelligence that hates us or wants evil for us, and yet for all the right reasons, all the wrong things are happening. They get it, I think.
You said in like 2013, I'm pretty sure on camera, that your parents kind of always knew that this was, when it started, they're like, oh, yeah, Cody was gonna do something like this. Like, they weren't completely surprised.
This is so embarrassing. I mean, I'm from Arkansas. I don't know if that's in the thing. And so I'm like, what was I doing? I was reading like Foucault or something, just like some really like edgy, just some dumb shit. And my mom like cried one time. I was like, what's wrong? She's like, I just know. I just know where this is going. And I've always felt guilty about that. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. One of the things, more for Cody, I noticed throughout, whether it's the beginning and various moments throughout the film, you have a camera or video camera. I mean, can you talk about what photography or, is that creative process something that brings you joy? Because, I mean, a lot of the movie you suffer, so I just wonder, like...
I don't know how you guys watch this movie, but... yeah, sure, I like Sony cameras, and I like to film what we do. I think it's all about what you can and can't display, or what you can and can't convey. When I did this, I released this AI recently called GPT, and it was really fun to do an AI filmmaker workflow. Like, I filmed no part of it, for example, and yet a lot of the prompts were like, well, do this more like Roger Deakins. It was really fun. But yeah, I'm constantly thinking about lens choice and like, okay, well, what am I actually saying with this blocking, or like, where is the attention actually directed? Because it's, you say everything when you belly up with the style and the presentation and the frame. People think with new media, the content is what I'm saying, the post I'm making, the text, and it's like, the content is the character of the medium, right? And I'm an elder millennial too, you guys. So like, I'm getting left behind with TikTok and all these things, I'm sure, but I still think there's tons of, media systems theory that you can apply to this stuff. It's almost totally unexploited.
What time is it?
It's 10:20.
Okay. We're not getting kicked out, so that's good.
It's amazing that you're staying. Thank you for staying.
Yeah, maybe it's... I don't know.
Is there any more questions? Is it a wrap? Do you have a last question?
Well, I just want to take a moment just to congratulate you and to just say bravo and one more round of applause for Jessica.
Thank you.